The day my parents suspended my schooling, they didn't just take my books or my backpack, they took my dignity. "You will apologize to your brother," my mother said, eyes cold as ice. "Only then will you return to school." I blinked, trying to process her words. Apologize? To Jason, the golden boy of our family, the one who never did homework, never faced consequences, and somehow still earned trophies, praise, and indulgence. The one who got away with everything while I stayed silent, invisible, and responsible. My name is Ion, and I've always been the good child in our house. Straight A's, polite, obedient, disciplined, basically the perfect foil to Jason, my younger brother, who thrived on charm, excuses, and favoritism. Teachers loved him, my parents adored him, the world seemed to bend around him. Me? I kept my head down and played the game, until this. It started with a trivial argument over a group project. Jason forgot to do his part, so naturally, I pointed it out in class. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet, factual statement. But somehow, that small truth exploded into a family crisis. By the end of the day, my parents were lecturing me, scolding me for hurting Jason's feelings, and demanding that I apologize, or face suspension. When they handed me the official notice, my heart sank. No school for a week, my name tarnished among teachers who didn't understand, and a humiliating mandate to grovel to the brother who had done nothing wrong. At the dinner table, Jason smirked, savoring every word of my punishment. "Don't worry," he said, spooning spaghetti onto his plate, "I'll forgive you eventually." Maybe. I wanted to throw the plate, shout, or cry, but instead, I smiled. Politely. Nodded. The obedient son, once again. But beneath that forced composure, unease stirred. Something didn't sit right. My parents weren't just enforcing rules, they were protecting him, shielding him from accountability in a way that went beyond favoritism. Their adoration of Jason had morphed into something darker, something almost strategic, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time I'd be forced to kneel. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the question gnawed at me: how far would they go to keep their golden boy untouchable? I didn't know the answer yet. But I knew this: I wasn't going to forget. And somewhere deep inside, a small, stubborn flame of defiance had already begun to burn. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The suspension should have been the end of the story, but it was just the beginning. That night, I noticed the first cracks in the family facade, small, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore once I paid attention. Jason's smirk lingered in my mind as I scrolled through my phone. I noticed he had received a text from Mom during the argument, one that he immediately deleted when I glanced at his screen. The message was short, but the way he grinned after reading it made my stomach twist. I couldn't help but wonder, was she giving him instructions on how to manipulate the situation? The next day, my father called me into the living room under the guise of family discussion. He asked why I had made Jason upset, and how I intended to fix it. There was nothing about fairness or facts, nothing about accountability. The conversation felt rehearsed, almost scripted. And every time I tried to defend myself, he shifted the blame back onto me, making me feel small, irresponsible, ungrateful. Meanwhile, Jason's behavior was getting bolder. He bragged to friends about how he could get away with anything. He would sneak snacks, skip chores, and ignore homework, then casually drop hints that my parents had spoken to him about me. The words weren't direct, but the implications stung. My parents seemed oblivious, or worse, pleased. Then came the secret calls. I noticed my mother stepping out of rooms for long conversations, whispering, sometimes laughing quietly. When I asked who she was talking to, she waved me off, saying it was family business. My father, too, started disappearing for hours, leaving me with Jason and the constant pressure to apologize. Money issues added another layer of unease. A small allowance discrepancy, Mom said I owed Jason for helping him with school supplies, turned into a pattern. Every favor I had ever given him was being tallied against me, twisted into a moral debt I could never repay. By midweek, I felt trapped in a web of manipulation. Every glance between my parents and Jason carried a silent message: you are in the wrong, no matter what. Every request for fairness was dismissed, every protest labeled disrespect. Emotionally, I was unraveling. Sleep came in fragments. My stomach ached with anxiety, my mind constantly replaying every encounter, every word, searching for the line between justice and favoritism. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was overreacting. But deep down, a gnawing suspicion grew. Something about this wasn't right. This wasn't just favoritism, it felt orchestrated. And every time I looked at Jason, that smug little smile reminded me, he wasn't the victim. Somewhere in the shadows of their smiles and polite words, I sensed the truth. And I realized, I would have to find it myself. Because no one else in this house was going to tell me. It hit me like a punch to the chest, though I had been sensing it all along. One evening, while Jason was bragging about his perfect grades to a friend over speakerphone, I overheard my parents discussing something in hushed, urgent tones behind closed doors. The words sliced through me: we need him to apologize, or he won't inherit anything. I froze. My mother, my father, they weren't just favoring Jason, they were weaponizing their love for him. They had suspended my schooling not as punishment for a minor argument, but as leverage. They were holding my education hostage to protect their golden boy and secure his place in the family fortune. I felt my chest tighten, disbelief mingling with a hot surge of anger. They can't, I whispered to myself. But the evidence was undeniable: whispered conversations, secret smiles, the way Jason never faced consequences while I was punished for honesty. Every detail suddenly made sense. My parents weren't impartial arbiters, they were conspirators, ensuring Jason's untouchable status while I, the responsible child, was ground down. Heartbreak washed over me first. This was the family I had trusted, the people I had counted on to guide me fairly, to nurture both their children equally. Instead, they had chosen manipulation over love, favoritism over integrity. My childhood, my efforts, my sacrifices, they were meaningless if I couldn't play along with their scheme. Then came the rage. I wanted to scream, to storm into their room, to call out the hypocrisy for everyone to hear. My fists clenched, jaw tight. Jason, oblivious, kept laughing and pointing out my failure to apologize like it was a joke. It wasn't a joke. It was betrayal. A carefully orchestrated trap that made me the villain in my own home while glorifying a younger brother who had done nothing but exploit the system. I paced my room, feeling trapped yet determined. Their plan had one fatal flaw: they underestimated me. They assumed that guilt and love would bend me into submission, that I would grovel, beg, and ultimately surrender. But the thought of surrendering, of letting them manipulate my life and dictate my future, sparked something deeper than anger. I realized something crucial: this wasn't just about an apology. It wasn't about a suspension. It was about control, power, and their willingness to sacrifice fairness for favoritism. And if I wanted justice, I couldn't rely on anyone else. I had to take matters into my own hands. The betrayal was clear. Heartbreaking. Infuriating. But it was also illuminating. For the first time, I saw their true colors. And in that moment, I made a silent vow: they wouldn't win. Not Jason, not my parents, not the entire world if it came to that. The question now was how. And I intended to find out. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, replaying every argument, every unfair comment, every suspicious smile. The betrayal cut deep, but somewhere beneath the hurt, a fire began to spark. For years, I had tried to please my parents, to follow the rules, to be the responsible one while Jason thrived on charm and favoritism. And for what? To be suspended over a petty argument, manipulated into apologizing for speaking the truth. It hit me like a jolt. They weren't just punishing me. They were trying to break me. To make me small, compliant, grateful for scraps. But I realized something powerful. I didn't have to accept that. I didn't have to beg for forgiveness for standing up for myself. I thought of Jason, smug and untouchable, thinking he had won because my parents had forced me to kneel. I imagined the future they were trying to write for him: golden trophies, unearned praise, a free ride through life. And then I realized, he wasn't the real enemy. My fight wasn't with him. My fight was with the system they had built around him, my parents' blind favoritism, their manipulation, their willingness to punish me to protect him. The moment of clarity came when I remembered my old journals, tucked away in my desk drawer. I flipped through the pages, reading about the projects I'd completed, the sacrifices I'd made, the moments I had been counted on to support the family while Jason coasted. Every page screamed one truth: I had worked for my life, my achievements, my future. And no suspension, no forced apology, no golden boy favoritism could erase that. I clenched my fists and felt the hurt transform into determination. I would fight, not with anger alone, but with strategy. If they thought they could manipulate me with guilt and authority, they had underestimated one crucial thing. I could be meticulous, patient, and cunning. I could gather proof, expose their favoritism, and turn the tables in a way they would never see coming. For the first time, I felt a sense of power I hadn't known I possessed. Not the fleeting power of parental approval, but the steady, unshakable power of someone who has been wronged and refuses to submit. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was reclaiming my voice, my dignity, my future. By sunrise, I had a plan forming in my mind. Carefully, deliberately, I would expose the hypocrisy, the manipulation, and the favoritism. I would make it impossible for them to deny the truth. And when the time came, I would do it in a way that Jason and my parents could never recover from. The fire inside me was no longer hidden beneath hurt. It was ready. And I was ready. I didn't rush. That was my first advantage. On the surface, I looked defeated, quiet, cooperative, almost apologetic. I stopped arguing. I stopped defending myself. When my parents reminded me that my schooling was still on hold, I nodded like I accepted it. Jason mistook my silence for surrender. He got louder, cockier. Exactly what I needed. Step 1 was proof. I started documenting everything. Dates. Conversations. Exact words. I wrote down how my parents tied my return to school directly to apologizing to Jason. I saved text messages where my mother said, "This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't embarrassed him." I recorded voice notes immediately after arguments, while the details were fresh. I wasn't emotional, I was methodical. Step 2 was leverage. During one carefully timed conversation, I asked my father, calmly, innocently, what would happen if I didn't apologize. He sighed and said, "Then you'll have to accept the consequences. Education isn't everything. Jason understands loyalty." That sentence was gold. Education isn't everything. I repeated it back to him later, casually, while my phone recorded in my pocket. He didn't even notice. Step 3 was the trap. I told Jason I was considering apologizing, but only if he admitted he'd exaggerated the group project incident. He laughed and said, "Why would I? Mom and Dad already chose me. You don't matter right now." Another clean admission. He went even further, bragging that our parents had already talked about rewarding him later for the stress I caused. Inheritance. Support. Connections. All things I was apparently no longer entitled to unless I fell in line. Meanwhile, my parents grew more confident. They spoke openly now, no longer careful. They believed I was cornered. School administrators were told I was taking time off voluntarily. Relatives were told I was rebelling. Jason walked around like a prince, reminding me daily that one apology could fix everything. I let them believe it. Behind the scenes, I emailed the school, politely, respectfully, asking for written confirmation of my suspension and the reason behind it. When the reply came back, my stomach tightened. The school had no official record of misconduct. No disciplinary hearing. No formal complaint. Just parental pressure. That was when I knew this had gone beyond favoritism. This was abuse of control. I organized everything into folders, recordings, messages, timelines, school emails. I didn't confront them. I didn't threaten. I waited. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's inevitable. They still thought they were in charge, still thought my future was theirs to pause, to trade, to ransom for Jason's pride. They had no idea I was about to take their favorite weapon and turn it into evidence. And when the moment came, there would be no apology. Only consequences. The moment came on a Monday morning. My parents thought it was just another family meeting. My mother even made tea. Jason sat back in his chair, arms crossed, already bored, already victorious in his own mind. "Have you decided to apologize?" my father asked. I nodded. Jason smiled. That smile lasted exactly 3 seconds. "I've decided to tell the truth instead," I said calmly, and slid my phone onto the table. Before anyone could react, I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. "Education isn't everything. Jason understands loyalty." My mother froze. Jason's smile twitched. Then came Jason's own voice, loud and clear. "Mom and Dad already chose me. You don't matter right now." Silence slammed into the room like a gunshot. "What is this?" my mother whispered. "Evidence," I replied. "Of you suspending my education to force an apology. Of favoritism. Of coercion." My father stood up, furious. "You had no right." "Oh, I had every right," I cut in. "Because you didn't just punish me. You lied to my school." That's when I dropped the final bomb. I forwarded an email to the family group chat, my parents, Jason, my uncle, my aunt. The school's official response: "There is no disciplinary record for Ion. No suspension approved. Any absence was requested by the parents." My mother went pale. Jason shot up from his chair. "Wait, what?" "I sit the school counselor, the principal, and the district board," I continued, my voice steady. "Along with the recordings. And a statement explaining how my education was held hostage until I apologized." My father's anger collapsed into panic. "You did what?" The phone rang. "Principal's office." I answered on speaker. They asked questions. Calm. Professional. Devastating. Why was a student removed without due process? Why was an apology demanded? Why was one child punished to protect another? My parents stammered. Jason tried to speak, then stopped when the counselor asked him directly if he felt entitled to immunity. He had no answer. By the end of the call, the truth was official. My schooling was reinstated immediately. My parents were warned. A report was filed. Family counseling was strongly recommended. And Jason? For the first time in his life, he wasn't protected. Relatives started calling. Word spread fast. The golden boy wasn't golden, he was enabled. And my parents. They weren't strict. They were manipulative. Jason didn't look at me as I walked past him. My mother sat down slowly, like the floor had disappeared beneath her. As for me, I picked up my bag. I won't be apologizing, I said. Not now. Not ever. And for the first time, the power in the room had completely changed hands. The days that followed were surreal. My schooling was reinstated, my teachers and friends rallied behind me, and the whispers of relatives shifted from judgment to stunned admiration. Jason, who had once strutted around like a prince protected by parental decree, now moved cautiously, aware for the first time that charm and favoritism had limits. My parents, the architects of my humiliation, retreated into silence, their authority diminished in the eyes of the family and even themselves. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from manipulation. Free from the pressure to constantly appease someone who didn't deserve it. Free from living in a household where fairness was measured by favoritism. Every step I took toward school felt lighter, every conversation with friends felt genuine, and every glance at my reflection reminded me I had reclaimed my voice. But the most satisfying part wasn't just justice, it was exposure. The recordings, the emails, the documentation of their favoritism, all had become undeniable proof of a household skewed toward one child at the expense of another. Their smiles, once untouchable, now seemed hollow, rehearsed, and fragile. The golden boy's bubble had burst, revealing entitlement without protection, charm without consequence. I realized something crucial: betrayal can feel like the end of the world, but it can also ignite strength you didn't know existed. I didn't just survive their manipulation, I turned it into leverage, evidence, and ultimately, liberation. I spent that weekend reflecting, sitting by my window with a cup of tea, listening to the world carry on as usual. And yet, my world had changed. My parents no longer commanded the unquestioned respect they once took for granted. Jason no longer assumed the world owed him everything. And Ion, the obedient one, had proven that truth and courage outweigh favoritism and deceit. So, to anyone watching this story, have you ever been forced to apologize when you were not at fault? Betrayed by someone you trusted? I want to hear your stories. Share them in the comments below. And if you want more real-life tales of injustice, manipulation, and triumph, make sure to subscribe. Because here's the truth I learned the hard way. Those who try to control your life by punishing what is rightfully yours often forget one thing: the person they try to break can rise stronger than ever, and when they do, there is no saving face, only poetic justice. And in my case, justice wasn't just served, it was served with the clarity of undeniable truth, leaving no room for denial, no chance to hide, and no one to protect the golden boy from the consequences of his entitlement.